I have a question for you. It kind of goes into your background. You were a former Anglican cleric.
Hmm.
What
Yeah,
what
I
what
was.
what what was it that you're like, okay, this is it, the Catholic faith. I'm moving on over. What was it? What was that trigger point?
Oh gosh. Well, there's so many. I mean, I even before I became an Anglican cleric, an Episcopal priest, I was a high churchman. I studied in England, and so I kind of got into Anglo-Catholicism, the same world that St.
Wow.
John Henry Newman kind of pioneered in the 19th century, and came back to the States. And right around that time was when John Paul II died. And
Hmm.
I remember like watching his funeral and watching the election of Benedict XVI and just feeling like, wow, that's the real deal. That's it
Hmm.
right there. But I went forward and went ahead and got ordained in the Episcopal Church, served for about 10 years as an Episcopal priest, all the while sort of wondering where it was all going, feeling dissatisfied with Anglicanism for a whole lot of reasons. I mean, just sort of drifting, the faith drifting, and all these kinds of things that you've probably read about the Church of England and the Episcopal Church and all that sort of thing. But ultimately, for me, becoming Catholic was not about running away from the problems of Anglicanism, but
Hmm.
just finally really seeing the fullness of that vision of Catholicism. And that happened for me around 2018. I had moved to Nashville, Tennessee from Florida, and I was serving as an Episcopal priest there. I joined this ecumenical reading group with a number of nuns, Dominican nuns
Hmm.
from Nashville there, and and also some Anglicans. So there were some Catholics and some Anglicans, and we're reading these documents. We're reading John Paul II's Ut Unum Sint, his great document on ecumenism. We were reading some Vatican II documents, and I'm just like, this is it. I'm. They want me, and I need to be there. And so, that kind of set the stone rolling down the hill until we came into full communion. A lot more elements to the story than
Sure.
that, but that's the long and the short of it. And just like John Henry Newman says in his Apologia Pro Vita Sua, I mean, we've come into port from rough seas, and we have no regrets whatsoever.
Oh, yeah, you can't ignore that calling. It just tugs at you. My goodness. So you're an Anglican cleric. Was there a moment where you're
Mhm.
like, maybe I could be a Catholic priest?
Yeah, I mean, I explored that. I explored that when I was coming in and when I first came in, and yeah, I think theoretically the door is still open for that. But I have not discerned that that's my calling. I,
Hmm.
I I had a rich ministry for about 10 years, like I said, in parishes and at the diocesan level as an Anglican. And right, these days I don't. There's certain aspects of that I just don't miss, and that actually I think maybe we're going to create problems for me in my life as far as burnout and stuff like that. And so a lot of the things that I loved about being a minister, I still get to do. In fact, I get to do kind of even more of the things that I liked the best in terms of um, writing and some public speaking and, doing stuff like this. And, I feel very content that I'm serving the Lord the way he wants me to right now.
That's awesome. Yeah. What? So you mentioned you kind of touched on it. You got some projects in the works. What does that look like?
Yeah, I've got all kinds of stuff. I host the Ignatius Press podcast.
Oh
So
yeah.
that's a great gig for me. So basically every other week I read a great book and I get to interview a great author. So, that's just kind of one of my side things, but it's really wonderful. I really love getting to do that and getting to know the team at Ignatius Press and stuff. So that's one of the things I'm doing. I also write a column for Catholic World Report, which is another fun thing I get to do. And that builds on a lot of stuff I used to do at Word on
Yeah.
Fire. I worked there for about 3 years and I wrote a weekly column there as well. And
Nice.
made YouTube videos and did lots of stuff there. So I'm basically just doing a lot of that same stuff kind of on my own. And then I also work during the day at a church in Dallas. So I have a ministry, like an on the ground ministry as well. So all kinds of different things going on. The last thing I just would point out is I have recently started a nonprofit
Wow.
with another one of my former colleagues at Word on Fire, a guy named Bobby Mixa. He was the fellow of education at Word on Fire, and I was the fellow of popular culture. We're both totally fascinated by European civilization, and kind of the faith there. And we both have this kind of contrarian view, which says the church actually needs to be focusing on building up the faith in Europe, and that Europe and Christianity are inextricably linked. And
Hmm.
really, we need to keep that link alive. It's wonderful that the faith is exploding in the Southern Hemisphere. Wonderful and awesome. But we can't give up on the West. We can't. I mean, there is no West without the church. So we started this nonprofit called the Spe Salvi Institute, which is named after the encyclical by Pope Benedict XVI. And what we have a little podcast, we have a website where we're publishing some articles. We're building up to eventually having some conferences and some basically kind of intellectual retreat type things, that's based on this idea of kind of saving the West, focusing on Christianity and culture, picking up the mantle of these 20th century thinkers who were saying things before World War II, like, hey, now that the world has kind of been obliterated because of World War I, we need to rebuild, and we need to rebuild the right way based on Christ. World War II messed all of that up. The 20th century took us in a whole different direction, but it's time now in the 21st century to rethink, to get back to that business of Christian humanism, of rebuilding Christian culture. So anyway, that's what we're doing at the Spe Salvi Institute. It's early days. We're just beginning to try and raise some money and start planning some events, but it's something I'm pretty excited about.
Where can we find more information about this?
SpeSalviInstitute.com. And that's SPESALVI, SpeSalviInstitute.com. When you go there, you'll find our bios, you'll find some articles, you'll find a link to the YouTube videos for the podcasts that we've done. But you can read our manifesto, which is just kind of our statement of purpose for what we're doing. But there's a lot more to come. That's just kind of the bare bones, what we've got set up there right now. But yeah, we'd love for your listeners to follow us. We produce a weekly podcast, and we have an email list. We'd love for that to grow so that we can really build this ministry. We're excited about it. We worked at Word on Fire. We loved that work. And it was really exciting to learn a lot there and to be a part of Bishop Barron's ministry. It ultimately, we both moved on because we were not in a position to move to Minnesota, which was what was being asked of us, which we totally understand. We totally got that. But just for my family's sake, I wasn't really able to do that. So that's fine. You have a season of being here, being there, that sort of thing, and you learn and you grow. And I'm in a season now where I'm excited to kind of do some of my own stuff. And this is one of the things, Spe Salvi Institute.
Spe Salvi Institute. That's awesome.
Yeah.
You are a busy guy. Yeah, all sorts.
I try to be. I have to. It's just it's my way. And if I'm not busy, I want to get busy, like watching movies or doing something fun. To me, that's also kind of part of the life, right?
Yeah. You have all these people going through RCIA, and it's great. Everybody's pumped, and then they're done, and then it just people forget about them, and it's like we got to check in with our new convert friends and brothers and sisters. So that brought that up. Is that kind of how it felt too? You went through RCI or whatever program to get you into the Catholic Church. Was there anything else that happened afterwards? Did you feel like I'm still here? Hello?
Well, yeah, a little bit. We were very warmly welcomed, and we did not have to do our CIA. We were just sort of received with some instruction, but basically with kind of the credit given to us for our lifelong Christian journey. But yeah, I mean, one of the things, especially that some, like for example, from our tradition that I came from, the Anglican tradition, one of the things that is very much a hallmark of that tradition is smaller community. A very large Episcopal church is still going to be a very small Catholic church, basically, right? So, you become Catholic and you go to this church that has thousands and thousands of people in it, and it can be really hard to plug in. It can be really hard to connect. I mean, there's definitely a sense of anonymity in a lot of Catholic churches, unless you're the kind of person who really plugs yourself in. And that takes a particular kind of personality. Not everybody has that. You mentioned that somebody made a comment about an ordinariate church in San Antonio. There's one, there are a few in the DFW area where I live. There's a great, the flagship in Houston there, Our Lady of Walsingham. But those communities tend to be a little more tight-knit and a little more like the communities that some of these people have come from. So, that's a nice thing that we've experienced being members of the ordinariate, although we don't always go to the ordinariate because it's kind of far away from where we live. But anyway, yeah, I mean, it's a challenge to be sure. And I mean, I think every Catholic parish needs to be thinking about this. Like, how are we welcoming? How are we holding on to the people that want to be here?
Oh.
Yeah, that was one of the things that came up, I think, with the previous. Who was it? That was your director, the producer for New Manna.
Yes.
Grijalba.
Ray
Grijalba. Yeah, that's what he was saying about Catholics needing to connect with each other after Mass. And that was one of the things that my wife and I really missed when we came into the church, because I grew up Baptist and we were Episcopal before going to Our Lady of Walsingham, and it was like, no, everyone just leaves. There's no fellowship.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have this joke about that. I don't know if you all find this true, but when we first started going to a big Catholic church, something that we noticed was that everybody backed in parking. I don't know if this is, and this is something I don't know why this sounds significant. It might not at all to you, but it seemed that way to us. Here's why. Because it seemed after Mass, people could not get to their cars and out of that parking lot fast enough. And the backing in parking was kind of strategic, right? To that end. Which now a lot of these are great people who are involved in other things or whatever, but Sunday morning is about fulfilling that obligation, knocking out those 58 minutes or whatever it is,
Right.
and getting on with the rest of the day, which honestly to us was very strange. And again, I'm not really like trying to be judgmental. It's just, there are different sort of cultural things that obtain. And, I think these are things that cradle Catholics like ought to know about, like, that there are people maybe in their midst who who are sort of like trying to find their way in and like not quite sure how it works. Right.
Well, that's one of the missions, I think. One of the purposes of the Ordinariate was to, and even with Pope Benedict and the extraordinary form, that it's supposed to cross-enrich the cultural and other like liturgical aspects of the Church. And so we're even having these conversations because there are Ordinariate Catholics who were converts, and they're bringing in some of that culture, and just you hold it up side by side and say, oh, well, we could do some of that, and you just open the eyes of cradle Catholics who hadn't thought about it before. And so I think that the fact that we're even talking about it, it means the Ordinariate is fulfilling part of its mission.
Yeah.
I think that's right. Yeah.
One thing before we are at our parish that we're now homesteaders. We were just bouncing between parishes for a while just because we couldn't find a parish that fit what we wanted. But we ended up at one point at a Byzantine Eastern Catholic church. And one of the things that I was like, okay, this is awesome, was that after the Divine Liturgy, like right next to the church was like basically a cafeteria, and they would have lunch ready for everyone. Like it was like a full lunch. So you would, after Divine Liturgy, you would go and have lunch with everybody. And I'm like, this is awesome. I'm starving and this is food. Let's go. And I was like, how could we implement that? And I'm just thinking like these huge Catholic churches that I don't even think that could be applicable. But that was like, there's something to like having a smaller parish, smaller community where everybody knows each other and can congregate together like right after the Divine Liturgy or, Mass. That was interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. When I was an Episcopal priest, the main parish that I pastored in Florida, we had about a third of our congregation was West Indian. They were Barbadian and Jamaicans mostly. Wow. And their tradition in their Anglican churches back home was exactly what you just said, Keith, was to have lunch afterwards. So they would always just bring food, and it was impromptu, but there was always enough for everybody to have lunch every week. And my little children, they're older now, but I mean, that's their memory of childhood was their association of church is more being in the hall afterwards, running around and eating, as much as it was actually being in the service. And you're absolutely right that it's hard to replicate these things in these larger places. And most Catholic parishes, especially in the Sun Belt, are just so big that it's so hard to replicate that kind of fellowship. But maybe there are ways to figure it out, like I don't know, in cells or something like that. I don't know, but it seems like that's an important thing.
Yeah, food brings people together. Obviously, the bread of for the soul Eucharist, and then also something afterwards. Come on.